Okay, I think we'll get started. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This is the third in our Spotlight webinar series, and today we'll be talking about direct booking strategies. So I'm Lily, I'm the content manager at Triptease, and I wrote the report that came out on Monday, which this webinar is based around, which you can find on our blog and we'll circulate afterwards as well. And then joining me is Charlie, who is the Chief Tease at Triptease from New York. He's going to introduce himself.
Hello, that's it. You said already who I am. I'm Charlie, the Chief Tease. So started Triptease a few years ago, and I'm based between the US and Europe, speaking to as many hoteliers as possible, trying to understand what is working well for them in the world of fighting for direct bookings.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Charlie. We're just getting a little bit of feedback on the mics apparently, so I'm just going to turn my sound down. But do let us know, everybody, if you're having issues. I think that should be okay now. Okay, so today's webinar is on direct booking strategies, and it's based partly around the report, as I said, on Monday, but also the direct booking summits that we held in September and October in New York and Barcelona, and from our conversations with hoteliers there. So in your control panel, there's a little question section. So throughout the report, we'll be stopping for questions at the end of every section. So do just keep submitting your questions, and we'll try and get to them all. Okay, so for an overview of what we'll be talking about today, we're going to begin with a summary of the direct booking movement and how it's changed since the inaugural direct booking summits last summer. Then we're going to move on to talking about a little survey we did recently on strategies that hoteliers have been implementing this year. And then we're going to try and get through OTAs, loyalty, live chat, and meta search, touching briefly on each, what was said at the direct booking summit, what people said in our survey, and what hoteliers should be thinking about as we head into 2018. So hopefully we'll be able to say something interesting about all of those. So to begin with, the direct booking movement. So up there is the direct booking summits last year, where we were giving out free hugs for hotels, and at the bottom, the direct booking summits this year, where we seem to be just giving a lot more tequila to hotels. So Charlie, I was just wondering if you could take us through, so obviously I wasn't around at Triptease last year, how you kind of felt the movement has moved on since then.
I mean, it's a funny one because you can't characterize all hotels in the same way. There are many different properties in different stages of their evolution. Certainly, the desire and the sort of the clarity of purpose and need for direct bookings it just keeps on increasing. People realize how important it is to have a direct relationship and to use that to then remarket to guests, to understand them better, and to, amongst other things, reduce commission payments to third parties. So I think that's still clear. The big shift from last year to this year is last year the big hotel groups were just beginning to really kick off their large book direct campaigns. For about 6 months of last year, I think the jury was out about to what extent they were working for the big groups. And I think now broadly, and we've seen some research from Calibri Labs that shows that it's been working for big groups. Their drive to get more people to book direct, to join their loyalty schemes, is having a positive impact for them and for their bottom line. So having sort of seen, that's one of the things, that the confidence, there was a little bit of a shake, I guess, around December, January last year, but now it feels like hotels realize that this can work and this is working. And so probably the main thing I'd say we've seen is that independents and small groups this year have become more assertive, I think is the right word, in their push for direct. So we're beginning to see a trickle-down effect of, for example, when the big groups say we're going to have cheaper rates to book direct, we're starting to see independents and smaller groups do that too, as well as copy, replicate many of the same kind of strategies that we're seeing with the larger groups, and in terms of offerings and best rate guarantees and various other things. So I think it just feels like momentum is increasing, impact is being seen in the market, and people are trying things. I'd add one other thing though to that. Sort of that all sounds good, and it's not all good. One of the truisms right now is more people are shifting from offline to on. As a result, there are a lot of hotels who are saying, well, we're putting an effort into driving direct bookings, but actually we're seeing that our OTA bookings are still flat or increasing. now they might be getting more direct bookings, but the OTAs are not. So it doesn't feel always like the OTAs are reducing in commissions, and that's because there's just a general shift from offline to online, even if a hotel's doing a good job of driving direct. So I think that might actually be a bit of research that we pull out in the future to show that if you're managing to keep your OTA booking commission sort of flat, you're actually doing a pretty good job, given that those guys are growing at 30% a year.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that was a very comprehensive overview of the movement. Charlie, someone just can't hear on the webinar, so I was just wondering if you're sitting close enough to your mic. I think it is just one. I can hear you fine, yeah.
Okay. I'm tempted not to change too much.
Yeah. I think it was just one person so far, so maybe it was something with their computer, but do let us know if it's an issue. Okay, yes. So moving on. So we did a little piece of research in October this year with a group of 32 hoteliers. So they were kind of worldwide, so they were from, I think, 20 different countries, but all towards the smaller end of the spectrum. And I kind of wanted to do this piece of research on the strategies that people have been, the kind of tangible things people have been doing over the last year. Because the Direct Booking Summit's really opened my eyes to the absolute breadth and diversity of what people were trying and trying to, do I copy what the big brands are doing, or do I try something that works better for me as an independent, and where's the balance? So we asked people that these 32 hoteliers to each give us 3 strategies that they'd implemented in 2016, so these were new to their hotels. And for each of those, we asked them to give us an effort score, so out of, from 1 to 5, how much effort did it take to implement, and then the impact score, so again, from 1 to 5. And so then so that gave us 96 strategies, and then kind of combining the ones that people that are saying the same thing and excluding outliers where it was just one person saying them, this brought us down to 18 strategies with a kind of averaged out score of the effort and impact it took to implement. So Charlie, I was just wondering if you could run us through if anything surprised you about these results.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the ways we judge the success of the Direct Booking Summit is watching people in the audience during the different talks. And if you see people furiously taking notes about all the things they want to do when they get back to their hotel, we see that as a good thing. But then we also realized that people were taking so many, they had so many new ideas and things to try that actually it was becoming too hard to know where to start. So that's a good reason for doing this kind of research. The one that I think jumped out for most people was implementing schema.org. So that's right at the top there. So just to explain what that is, if it's new to you, you know, Google looks at your website and Google can see what you're saying, but it doesn't necessarily understand what everything that you put in your website or on a blog post or whatever, what it means. And schema.org is a way of marking up the content on your site so that Google understands what type of content it is you're showing. And the benefit of that is, you know, if you show a type of content that is, you know, like the name of an author, for example, on a blog post, or details about the hotel facilities, if you flag and mark up in the right way what your content is, then Google will display it in a search in a more sophisticated, sort of smarter way. So it's basically tagging elements on your website so that Google can better interpret it and display it. So given that Google is sort of the starting point for most people's search and it's only becoming more important, this is something that I think most people who heard one of the talks at the event thought this is a quick win. It feels like it can have a big impact and is low effort. So that's definitely something, and if you're interested in finding out more, I think the easiest way to do that is Google for Structured Data Markup Helper. There's a good little tool by Google that helps you do this. Structured Data Markup Helper. Anyway, so that one jumped out, and equally, yeah. And I'm sorry, there's a bit of noise in the background. This is the downside of New York. Lots of hospitals around here. The other ones that jumped out were parity management, because I guess the truth is it's quite a lot of effort as well as having a big impact for us. That's usually the first thing we say to hotels. If you've got bad parity, it almost doesn't matter how good or bad your website and booking engine are. If you've got bad parity, people will book elsewhere. So you've got to fix that. But yeah, I think we've got a few more to come. But the goal for us was just this. If people have got a list of 50 things that they could do, that doesn't actually help hotels, because then you've got to pick them. And so we figured if we can continue to do this kind of research, if you guys think it's useful and we get positive feedback, what we're really looking to understand and tease out is, people who've actually been through the experience of, for example, implementing a new loyalty scheme. How much real effort was it? Because it's often hard to know what the effort is and what the reward is. But that's the starting point.
Definitely. Thank you, Charlie. So then if we take away the effort scores. Oh, Charlie, also someone was saying that your signal might be cutting out a little bit. I don't know if it's something that everyone's having a problem with. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Only on Charlie, apparently.
Okay. Well, maybe if I speak more slowly, then when it cuts, you'll miss less of what I say. I don't think there's much I can do about it right now. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everyone. So then, looking at just highest impact, taking away the effort scores altogether, what surprised me was that started revenue management came up so much, because I had it in my head that all hotels have revenue and all hotels manage that revenue in some way. But I think kind of from talking a bit more to hotels and to people around the business, we kind of came to the conclusion that there are kind of different tiers of how people define revenue management for themselves. Oops, I think someone just dropped something
different
outside.
Stages. Yeah. So I think we're kind of seeing three different people are in three different stages of revenue management. There's using an Excel spreadsheet to compare approximately prices last year and volume of bookings. Then there's using some of the tools out there that are free, from Expedia's Rev Plus tool, which you might want to check out, to paid ones that are very good, like OTA Insight, which allow you to see the prices of local competitors, and using that to come up with a revenue strategy. And then one step beyond that, the third option is you go full-blown machine learning, artificial intelligence-driven pricing decisions from Duetto or Infor or another organization. So I think hotels are at very different stages of it. So yes, as a phrase, is a hard catch-all, because actually it means very different things to different people. It definitely feels like an area where a lot of people are focusing. There's no question that improving your pricing sophistication can drive increased bookings and increased RevPAR.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So I think we're going to move ahead. I think Sorry, there was one little one as well on this that I wanted to pull out, because I saw the new CRM. That jumped out at me because I was surprised at the effort that people said it took. The sort of relative effort score of 3 there was actually easier than I thought it would be. My expectation was that setting up a new CRM, I know that with ours internally, it's just like a never-ending challenge of how much do you segment people, what messages do you give, when do you give them, are people getting too many messages? You can be very sophisticated with it, and it can take forever. Or I guess you can also do it in a straight off-the-shelf way. But to see that a newer CRM, obviously it has high impact, we always expected that. To see that people are managing to set up CRM without too much effort, I think is a really good sign. We need to kind of dig into feedback from different CRM vendors, but certainly, whether that's ZDirect or Guestfolio, I think Sendai and Guestfolio are ones worth considering. But that impressed me, that people were getting that out the door without too much effort. Definitely, and it's something that we're looking to do some research into in the first quarter of next year, because it was something, especially from the Direct Booking Summit in New York, it really surprised me. There was a talk from Del Ross on this kind of thing, and from McKinsey & Company. And just the reaction to it from the audience really took me by surprise, was how much this resonated with the hoteliers and how many people were in the process of doing this themselves. So it's something that we're looking into at the moment. So moving on, we're going to talk about OTAs, our good old friends. We're going to be talking through some of the main messages that were coming out of the Direct Booking Summit, as it was inevitably a topic of conversation. And we're also going to kind of look ahead to 2018 and talk about what hoteliers should have on their radar. So first, Charlie, I wanted to ask you about this research. This is, I think it came out in the last couple of weeks from Calibri Labs, who found that there's absolutely no question that the Book Direct campaigns, so we're thinking of Stop Clicking Around from Hilton and Marriott and those campaigns, so those had an impact on the market growth of OTAs. And actually that growth slowed while brand websites, their room night share grew considerably. So Charlie, I wanted to kind of dig into what relevance does this have for a hotel who wasn't a Hilton or a Marriott? Is this the trickle-down effect that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I think absolutely. So the messaging that consumers are getting, so I guess for 10 years, there was very clear messaging around OTAs, and the messaging in the marketplace was you'll always get a better price through an OTA. And I think that sort of global message across the internet is dying down, and instead slowly beginning to pick up speed and momentum is that it's always worth checking direct, because direct you may get a better deal, may get a better offer. So I think that is beginning to kick in people. No doubt we're in a bit of a bubble, right? We're in hotel tech. We think about this all day. We probably notice and identify that earlier than most people, but I definitely think it's beginning to have a consumer impact. So there's a benefit for small hotels. And for me, one of the, sorry, I should just quickly say a quick advert for Calibri Labs. Cindy Estes Green came and spoke. She's the founder there of the New York Direct Booking Summit. And she is one of the most insightful people, and their organization has some of the best data, we think, around distribution strategies. So if you don't know them, I highly recommend go to their website, sign up for their newsletter. They've got some really good data. And it's pretty clear that the book direct strategies are beginning to work for the big groups.
Absolutely, yeah. So I've just these 4 terms are kind of the themes that kept coming up at the Direct Booking Summit. So some of these are direct quotes from hoteliers that we haven't attributed. But I just kind of wanted to go through and be interested to know from the audience which camp you're kind of falling into at the moment. In terms of how you're treating your relationships with OTAs. So if we start in the top left with constant vigilance. So this was actually the viewpoint from a hotelier who works at a resort in, I think it was Mexico. And she has a colleague whose full-time job is to just keep on top of the OTAs. So she invites her market managers to the hotel every week, which seemed incredible to me. She updates herself on what they're doing every day and is constantly being vigilant about what the OTAs are up to. And she says, this means we can take advantage of the OTAs instead of them taking advantage of us. So Charlie, I was wondering what you thought about that attitude and whether that's something, I mean, it's quite resource heavy, right? That's a whole person whose job is OTAs, but do they need that type of attention?
I mean, I think it depends slightly on the size, scale of property and where you are in the world. We see with different OTAs, I mean, literally it comes down to market managers in various regions, the extent to which they push the boundaries of what is in the hotel OTA contract. So it can be quite specific, I think. But as an overall thing, I think there's no question. Most hotels need to be vigilant all the time. So, for example, one thing that stood out to me was a small hotel group who said that they took part in one of the closed user group special offers that one of the OTAs offer. And they said the moment that they put their hotels on, and let's say, for example, that it was the Genius program on Booking.com, they found that the moment they put their hotels on a program like that the OTA suddenly had a really strong incentive to spend more money on advertising on Google, because they had a special rate for people in their closed user group, and most people come into Booking. In fact, I don't know what the proportion is, but many people, no doubt, would be members of that closed user group. So suddenly, the hotel had given a discount to an OTA, and as a result, that OTA now had a new incentive to go and spend more money on bringing guests who are on Google onto the OTA rather than letting them go to the hotel. And they had that because they got a higher conversion rate. The OTA got a higher conversion rate. Now they had a lower rate. So in a sense, it was the hotel thought they were buying into a program that had one impact and it had a different one. And if it wasn't for being vigilant, they wouldn't have realized it. So I think there's no question you need to be vigilant. The OTAs are out there. They're fighting in a very tough market. It's very hard for them to be successful in what they're doing. They've got tough competition, and sometimes they have sharp elbows and push the boundaries a little. And I think you've got to absolutely be watching them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think once we've gone through these 4, I would like to return a little bit to that bidding on brand terms from the OTAs, because it's again something that came up a lot. But if we move down to don't make them the bad guys. So this was something that I certainly, when I was interviewing quite a lot of smaller properties, so under 50 rooms, that kind of properties, and they were struggling with the messaging, kind of just the kind of industry noise of, it's hotel versus OTA or anything. And I don't think thinking in those binaries is ever useful, but especially for a smaller property who has a lot to thank these organizations for. They were saying, I could never have filled my hotel if it hadn't been for these, for the OTAs. Um, so, and I think what they were very much in the camp of, I get that all of this marketing power from the OTAs that I would never have got, and it's then my responsibility to make sure if those guests return, they return with me. And I think that's something worth thinking about as well, that someone said at the Direct Booking Summit, one of the speakers, is that, once they're in your hotel, they're your guest and they need to return as your guest. And I was wondering, Charlie, is that something that's easier said than done?
It's certainly not an easy thing to do. There's one hotel general manager I met recently in the Middle East, and what he's done is he's employed a full-time person whose job it is each morning to just focus on guests who book via an OTA and get it to book direct. And this may be something that there's only an ROI for in the Middle East, where there's a very, very high OTA booking proportion. But what he has is a lady in-house who looks every day at arriving guests and how they booked, and she identifies anyone who booked via an OTA. And if they're coming back to the hotel, so it's like a return visitor, and they've booked via an OTA the second time, then she makes sure she goes and meets them that day and gives them an incentive to book direct, and also just creates a relationship with them so that they understand that the hotel would prefer them to book direct in the future. So she does that, and he says it's a great return on investment. She keeps busy all day, going out and seeing guests and chatting to them. And then he, as the general manager, if there's a guest who's booked 10 times, and is booking through OTAs, he then makes sure he sees them and has a coffee with them in-house to try and push them. So there are like very practical things that people are doing in property to drive that. Yeah, I think the real reason why there's constantly this battle is because everybody agrees that where the OTAs are bringing incremental bookers, they're good value. But often what happens is they bring you bookers you're going to get anyway and charge you for it. And it's just making sure that like you're fighting that line and holding them to account that what you're getting is incremental, because I think it's totally fair and fine to be paying for that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I just wanted to move up quickly. I think we need to move on to our next section, but the consciously uncoupling really caught my eye at the Direct Booking Summit. So this was one of our speakers who was from an independent hotel in New York. And I don't know if you know the phrase already, but that's when Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin of Coldplay divorced. That was the term they chose for it, and that's how he terms it, his cutting contracts with the OTAs. Because his view was that if the OTAs that he works with don't meet a minimum standard when it comes to transparency, response time to queries, and limited movement, so he was saying that it felt like every week he had a new market manager to take out of lunch, and they didn't have the time for that. So if they don't meet a minimum standard of those three categories, then they consciously uncouple. And I think that's something that I felt was that people were, and if we move down, taking the leap. We spoke to one hotelier who I think had a small group in Egypt, and she had just cut ties with the OTAs this year, and actually her direct bookings had gone up by 20%. So I think there is a story there. That is not going to be what happens for everyone, but there are people who are taking that chance now. Which is, I've just skipped ahead, which is encouraging. So briefly, Charlie, I was just going to take some questions from the audience. I think we've had a few in. So someone said, a hotel having 60% from OTAs, how do you encounter as market is moving toward it? So I'm not quite sure what they mean there by encounter, whether that's how often we encounter that kind of thing, or how do we deal with such a large proportion of OTA business?
Yeah, it's a bit hard to know for sure exactly what the question means. So if you'd like to write again, please, questioner, do feel free. But otherwise, if it's just a case of, well, what can I do to deal with it? I think that's exactly why we, if you download the report, you can look in more detail at the different efforts that people have put in and the impact that's had. So, I can't do better than say we asked hotels, both the 32 that Lily spoke to, but also at the event, we asked all the attendees to tell us about what are the things they've done to drive direct bookings that worked, what had impact, and how much effort it was. And so if I were a hotelier, I'd start with that list and think, well, of this list of the top 20 things, how many of them have we done? Can I get one done a month? Can I get one done a week? And if I chip away and get these things done one by one, then I'll be in a better place. Usually our starting point is always make sure you've got great parity. You don't have to be cheaper direct, but you certainly don't want to be cheaper elsewhere. If you give guests an incentive and a reason to book elsewhere, they will. It's just that simple. And one of the things we find often is hotels, particularly if you've got high OTA bookings, you may believe you've got good parity. You may believe you've paid for a channel manager that's ensuring that you've always got the same rates as an OTA, but actually we find very frequently that's just not the case. So it really is worth investing some time, maybe investing in a tool, and there are many out there that will help track the extent to which you're being undercut, because that is the starting point. You've got to, you can't expect people to pay more booking direct.
No, exactly. I think we had a couple of questions come in about TripTease, but we might save those till the end of the webinar. We'll just try and keep cycling through the topics, and then we'll come back to those if those are okay, but we will come to them. So just next, moving on to loyalty. Charlie, I was wondering if you agreed with that quote there from David from Best Western.
I think this is the thing, right? There's no silver bullet. Loyalty is the best defense against OTAs, yes, if you're Best Western and if you're a good sized group. I totally can believe that, because if you're a good sized group and you've got people who are going to book in one property and then in another of your properties, then having a loyalty scheme can make great sense. I think if you're an independent, if you, again, there are independents. There's an independent hotel which myself and my family have been to time and again in Italy, where we're loyal to it, and so that is a great defense for them. But that's because it's a very specific vacation property. If you're an independent in a big city, you may not have the same ability to drive people back through loyalty. So I think that it's a factor, and it's certainly important for the big groups. I don't think it's necessarily number one for independents. We may talk a little bit about some of the other ways that hotels can manage loyalty, some of the schemes that are being put together for independents. Here we go. So perhaps in that case it can work. But I mean, it's the topic I've heard people say, in a sense, people say the same thing about loyalty at every hotel-related event I've been to in the last 2 years, which is that certainly, if you make it generational, that millennials are not loyal. People aren't loyal. I know myself, I have 5 different airline card loyalty programs I'm on. I do have a preference, but I actually will book based on the right flight, the right time, the right price, and then I just use whichever loyalty number I need for that airline. So I think it's a similar case for many people booking hotels. So loyalty maybe is dead. But yeah, a few of the types of loyalty that people will be speaking about. Lily, do you want to say instant rewards?
Do I want to take instant rewards?
Do you want to explain that?
So instant rewards, this is when on your website, so on the hotel website, in return for joining their loyalty scheme, so for signing up right away, you get an instant either a discount or a discount at the restaurant or some kind of instant gratification. So it's not just a discount in that you are signing up for the scheme as well, but instead of collecting those points on repeated stays, they're upfront, as it were. So my personal feeling is, I mean, I haven't taken a detailed look at how these have impacted the hotels that are running them. Whether people sign up to the scheme for the reward and then forget about the scheme, I'm not sure. I don't know if Charlie, you had an opinion about that.
No, I think some of the feedback we get. I mean, Citizen M is a good example of join, get a reward if you join, or get a discount if you join. So I definitely think that there's value to those instant rewards. I think separately we see another behaviour we're seeing hotels offer, which is here is a instant reward for booking direct. So it's not necessarily even the beginning of a loyalty relationship, and that I don't see that as being about loyalty at all. I see that as an incentive for booking direct. I think that has its own place, and it's a good potential thing to consider as a hotel. Yeah, definitely we've seen quite a big increase, I think, in the number of people members of schemes. But that only works, that only has an impact if you then have the organisation and the ability internally to actually follow through and make sure that you're delivering people who've signed up to a loyalty scheme some value to make sure that they book again and that they want to keep opening your emails or whatever it may be. So another one is experience-based rewards. Just picking up on this, I think this is, whenever we think about just rewards in general, whether it's for loyalty or rewards for booking direct, we always start with the thought of experiences. I think that people value experiences more. If you say, here's something you get, it's a wonderful experience during your stay, as opposed to, and you get $10 off, or you get a glass of wine. It doesn't, unless you're saying the glass is a glass of wine in our bar, which is, here's this wonderful story about the bar. I don't think it's quite as evocative and quite as emotionally captivating. So definitely big fans of trying to make incentives experience-based. And we're seeing more increasingly some of the mid-sized groups and even the larger ones saying, if you join the loyalty scheme and you collect, you then get to have really special experiences. It might be tickets to a concert, it might be skydiving or whatever it might be. But there's definitely some more creativity going into that side of loyalty schemes at the moment, the rewards.
Definitely. Oh, no. I was just going to say, I think that experience thing is often something that we circle back to is it is the kind of physical on-property experience of being in the hotel and what the hotel can offer. That is, I mean, it's the only thing that or one of the only things that an OTA just doesn't offer. They're a booking site. They offer the online experience. So hotels really taking the time to emphasise the on-property experience and what the differentiation is there. I think is really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you ever need any really good creative ideas on experiences, my suggestion is go and check out Airbnb. I mean, their trips program is really impressive. They put a huge amount of effort into almost creating a new cottage industry of people locally at let's say New York. So if you look at Airbnb in New York, you'll see not only the places you can stay, but you'll also see all of the individual entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs who will take you for an architectural walk around Brooklyn or a visit to the best coffee shops in Manhattan. And there are just many, many engaging experiences that local people are creating. And there are loads of organizations now out there, from Viator to Peak to Get My Guide, where you can find local experiences, the kind of things to offer. So there's just so much creativity that can be put to bear. So member-only pricing, that's obviously one we've seen a lot in the loyalty programs, particularly from the big groups. Our experience of this, because we're constantly tracking, right? Every time somebody's on a hotel website and they're running a search, we're looking at, based on whether the price was higher or lower than the OTAs at that time, did people book? So we're getting hundreds of millions of data points every month or so, where we're able to see what impact does being cheaper than an OTA have on your conversion rates. And one of the things we find that is always an interesting one is if you the hotel are the same price as the OTA, right? You get a certain number of bookings. If you're cheaper than an OTA by between 1% and 5%, so you're just a little bit cheaper than the OTAs, then your conversion rate goes up. You get more bookings. But what's really interesting is as soon as you get cheaper than an OTA by 7 or 8 or 9%, so you're now significantly cheaper, the conversion rate on your website stops going up. There's a point at which, when you offer a room on your website that is a lot cheaper than the OTAs, that it appears, our hypothesis is, that guests then doubt that it's the same thing. Guests begin to think, I just can't believe that you're 10% cheaper than Booking.com. It just doesn't make sense that you're 12% cheaper than Expedia. And in fact, the conversion rate starts to reduce. So what we find with member-only pricing is you don't want to overdo it. You want to be giving a discount that's 5–6% maximum, and even less than that can actually already have the impact you need. So there's a little tip. Don't over-discount.
It's a good one. And then just because we need to keep moving along, third-party platforms, I think probably the one most people would have heard of is the Guestbook, who spoke at our Direct Booking Summit in New York. Yep. So Charlie, I don't know if you wanted to just quickly run through what James and the team are doing at the Guestbook and what they offer to hotels.
Yeah, so this is they have a sort of a widget and ability to just put straight onto your hotel website, your booking engine. If you join the loyalty program, the Guestbook is a loyalty program across hundreds of independents. If you join it, then you get points back, you get prizes, as it were. So it's a way of independent hotels being able to bring that loyalty scheme to bear, basically. And another company I just found out about, Waymo. W-A-Y-M-O. They, in fact, there's a blog post this week on the Triptease blog about the best hotel tech startups from Focusrite conference, which just happened last week, and I talk about them a bit there. They're another example. There's a few of these.
Yeah. Chris, did we have any questions on loyalty? Got my helper in the room with me. Okay, this is it. Okay. So, if you are cheaper than the OTA, most likely you will not be listed above the fold on the first page of OTA results if you have a parity agreement. That affects your total bookings. So Charlie, I think from my knowledge, this will vary depending on the country you're in and the agreements you may have with your OTAs. But I don't know if you could elucidate a little bit on that one.
Yeah, it really does vary, because I think that certainly by country, I mean, in parts of Europe, parity is outlawed. So it's certainly not something that's easy to just draw a blanket over. Ultimately, I think it also comes down to the hotel and how you do it. So do the OTAs want you, with a parity agreement, to offer a cheaper direct price? No. Do I think it's right that you offer a cheaper direct price if you've got a parity agreement? No, I don't. I think you should hold them to parity, and you should stick to it too. I don't think you need to be cheaper to get more direct bookings. That's the first message. However, if you were to create a closed user group, or if you click this button, then you become a member, and we can show you the discount. I think then it is totally fair for you to offer cheaper rates direct. The OTAs offer closed user group pricing, which is different from the parity agreement. So I think there are ways to do it. I'm trying to think where I've seen it done elegantly, where a user very simply can see, here's the standard web rate, and they click a single button, and they can instantly see the loyalty rates. I have a feeling it may be on IHG, on some of their sites they may do it, and Citizen M maybe. I'd need to check though. But you can do that just as in the same way that the OTAs have a closed user group rate.
Yeah, so it seems like we've actually had someone saying that they're from USA and have hotels in the USA and Latin America, where parity is still, it's not outlawed. And their member-only pricing has been is not allowed by the OTA they're working with. So it sounds like it could be being written into some contracts to exclude closed user group pricing. I'm not sure if we've come across that before, if that's a certain OTA that does that.
I don't know the details of this one. I mean, I think what we generally find is that even the local market managers try to apply quite different policies based on the extent to which they think they've got the muscle to enforce certain things contractually. It was certainly one of the things in your survey that people said they spend the most time on were commissions and the ability to put into their contracts whether or not there's parity. I really think it comes down to the individual property, your group, because if you're an independent property in a country, there's often we know that there are definitely properties who are offering cheaper direct prices and where the OTAs are not picking up on it. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but I know it happens. Equally, there are ones where the OTAs are holding them hotels very closely to account. This kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier, is if you're the hotel who is constantly managing whether the OTA is playing funny games and discounting or bidding on brand terms or whatever, if you're the squeaky wheel, you get the grease. And I think it's the same, right? Some of the OTAs will push harder on this than others.
Yeah, I think we've got one more question and then we'll move on. If possible, can you share any study or research on 2017 OTA versus direct booking percentages? Focusrite had one for 2015 but can't find 2017 numbers. I can't off the top of my head, but will do my best to find one. I think, Charlie, have you seen anything recent numbers-wise?
It's very variable. I've seen some US numbers, groups versus OTAs, but that's a very different statistic from, say, European independents. So it depends. But please watch this space. That is exactly something. There's someone else in the team who I've asked to pull exactly that data recently. So we will be hopefully delivering some research on it soon. Thanks for the question.
Perfect. And in the meantime, as Charlie said before, Calibri Labs, so that's Kalibri, they have a lot of research in this area. So I'm not sure if they'd have that exact figure that you're looking for, but they may well do have something surrounding it. So moving on to live chat, which we're not going to talk too thoroughly about here. One, because we're pushed for time, but also because next week we have a Hotelier's Guide to Live Chat being released, and the week following that we are doing a live webinar with T-News all about live chat, so we don't want to use up all our good material here. But just quickly, I just was wondering, first of all, Charlie, if you could tell us a bit about how do you feel the importance of live chat? Has it changed? Was it even something people were talking about at the summit last year? And has that changed over the last 12 months?
It was absolutely not spoken. It was barely spoken about last year. I think it's completely changed. I think the realization that people use their mobile phones not for phone calls but for messaging has really sunk in. That trend has only increased, right? The number, all the data shows that messaging is the number one thing people want to do on their phones, and we know that bookings via phones are increasing, and certainly research of hotels is now more prevalent on telephones than, say, desktop. So, like, we know for the device it's really important, and we know that that people want to do it. And the great thing, the extraordinary thing maybe about live chat and about messaging is that it's completely transgenerational. My 10-year-old daughter loves messaging her aunt. My parents like messaging me, right? It's all generations. So the importance of it, I think, is really clear and is growing. And I would say that now where we're at is a lot of early adopters are saying, we need to do this, consider being able to respond to people through messaging, through live chat on our website. If guests are on our website and they've got a question and that not having that question answered is preventing them from making a booking, we want to be there, we want to answer it. So I think that's sort of the first bit. And then what we're beginning to feel, certainly something we believe, is that the more like strategic thinking hotel groups are seeing conversations and messaging and live chat as really a differentiator to what OTAs can offer on the web. Right? There are many, many ways that hotels cannot compete with the OTAs. They are, incredibly digitally savvy. They have huge amounts of data and large marketing budgets. But the one thing you can do, the one thing you have that they don't, is hospitality. Right? Hotels have hospitality running through their veins, and messaging is an opportunity to have a one-to-one conversation with people, to bring hospitality onto the website. And so I think that's one of the realizations we're seeing running through the market. And my belief is that right now messaging live chat is optional for hotels, and in 18 months it won't be. And one of the reasons for that is Google and Amazon and Facebook and everyone is just like pushing through innovations that only increase the amount that consumers believe they should be able to and want to interact via message with businesses. So that's just going to sweep through in the next 6 to 12 months, and I think that very soon it will go from being a nice to have to table stakes, just like Wi-Fi.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think potentially that's intimidating to hotels. So on the screen there, I've got some of the responses from the direct booking site. So the resource question came up a lot. How would I ever man this? I'm busy enough as it is. So maybe we could talk a bit about that. But also, as you were saying, just the sheer rate of development, especially from Facebook Messenger, I was looking at the other day, and just all the things that you can do within it. For example, if you're talking to Skyscanner's bot and you can, have a proper conversation, book your flights, see all these different things. And hotels are coming to maybe just starting to think about live chat, and they think, well, I can't get close to that, or I feel like I can't get close to that. Have I just been left behind? So I was wondering if, for a hotel thinking that, oh, this is something I need to be doing, but intimidated by this, what seems like the scale of the project, what advice you would have for someone like in that position?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're lucky is that right now we're living in a world in which like machine learning and capabilities are accelerating at an incredible pace. So just at the point where hotels need to find ways to deliver one-to-one communications and messaging scalably, at the same time, artificial intelligence and machine learning is like jumping through massive hoops and getting better every day. So I think ultimately the way we see it from a hotelier, the right approach is there's a mixture of computer-supported human like interaction that actually can be very scalable, time and cost efficient. If you've got for example, and what does that mean, computer-supported humans? That means if someone has a basic request and the computer is 99% certain it understands that, then a bot can respond to that request. And that can instantly take off pressure and time and effort of people at front desk, reservation agents who otherwise have to answer a phone call. So you've got an instant saving of time once the bots are good enough to be able to handle enough responses with enough confidence. And then at the same time, if the bot is uncertain, it might suggest to an agent, here's what I think the question is about, and here's my suggested answer, do you agree? And the great thing about machine learning is every time that the agent is saying, I disagree to the computer, or I agree, and here's the response, the computer's learning and getting better, and it therefore next time is able to respond to similar questions. So I think that it can feel scary and daunting. I think there is definitely a certain amount of time and effort the hotel needs to put in to do it well. But at the same time, the tools are now becoming available to do it in a really efficient and effective way. And again, that's one of the changes I think over the next 12 months we'll see.
Definitely, and I would say it's just come to mind for anyone who is thinking about dipping their toe into this, but aren't sure where to start. So I was speaking to a hotelier at the Direct Booking Summit in New York, who has a large kind of branched out property in Texas with lots of different buildings, and lots of older staff members as well who've been working at the property for quite a long time. And she was saying rather than a live chat, which they may be thinking about in the future, to begin with, they've started FaceTiming from the front desk. So there's certain hours of the day advertised on the website that guests can actually FaceTime a reservation agent or whoever's working at the front desk. And because the staff who are perhaps older are so used to using the technology, and guests as well who are of a certain age, are so used to using the technology with their family members, and that it just felt like a really natural progression. So it's definitely one to consider, I think, because it's so easy to get set up with something like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think apparently, I suppose the same lady, she walks around the hotel with FaceTime and shows people the rooms that they're going to get when they book. But it's great. It creates a real relationship. It's a real rapport builder that you can't get if you're booking through a third party.
Exactly. It's like a live virtual tour of the hotel. It's great as long as your Wi-Fi doesn't cut out. So we will go into this in more detail in our report next week, but just to tease you with some of the content. So obviously we at Triptease have our own chat platform front desk. So we've been kind of learning from that every day in terms of how people are using it and the best ways to use it. And these are the kind of 3 tips that our kind of advice for conversations really boils down to. So answering quickly, and I think this is, this is a challenge we've found for hoteliers, but there is a recalibration of thought that needs to go on. So a chat is a kind of, the person is expecting a response, and the person is going to leave your webpage, and if they don't have the answer that they're looking for, they may not return. So we find that it's a 2-minute window, I think, Charlie, isn't it, that is the ideal kind of optimum response time.
Yeah, I think one of the things sorry.
No, go on.
We have noticed definitely some hotels who having adopted live chat felt that it was okay to respond a day later. But obviously what's happened, if someone's on your website and they've got a question, you respond a day later, they're just not on your website anymore. So it's not sufficient. It doesn't work. You do have to have a resourcing plan for it.
Yeah. And then next is being human. We saw some properties that were, this was very new to them, and they were, because normally in their communications with guests, whether it's via email, it would be quite formal and quite thought out. But it meant obviously that response time was growing, because a question would come in and then they would take quite a long time writing out a very long response. But people using a chat platform are expecting a message back in the style that they would get a message back on any other platform, whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook. So it's okay, I think. I mean, it's not about losing your hotel's brand or your hotel's style of communication, is that it's more formal. But it's okay to reply in more than one message. It's okay to, be slightly more colloquial, because another thing, it's often people chatting with chats on the website are so used to bots that they often think they're talking to a bot. And if you are a real, reservation agent who can really add value to this person's conversation and help them to make the booking that's right for them, then it is worth, showing them that you're human. And that comes on to point number 3 as well, and driving that conversation forward. So it's not just about answering a question that comes in. It's then, so if someone says, and with front desk as well, you know the search they've run. So someone comes to you and says, how deep is your swimming pool? But they've come from their search that they're bringing 2 children with them. So it's, the swimming pool is this deep. Do you know about our babysitting service? And leading that conversation on to kind of showcase the bits of their hotel that they wouldn't get just from a kind of yes/no response.
Yeah, I think for me that's been one of the biggest learnings for us, is seeing the difference between good and great people at replying to messages, is that they become, is being proactive in creating a conversation. It's just like if you have a sales reservation agent on the phone, if all they did was answer exactly in short sentences the questions they were given, then they don't build up much rapport. whereas instead, we want your good sales reservation agent to say, oh, and why is it that you're coming to Paris? What are you planning to do while you're here? And you get into a conversation, and you build rapport, and that's where we see the direct bookings really jumping up.
Brilliant. I think we've got a few questions that have come in.
Yes. So the question about front desk.
Okay. We have a couple of questions about front desk, Charlie. Do you want to cover them here or at the end of the?
Let's do it. Let's go for it now. So front desk being our live chat platform, just to be clear.
The question is whether front desk is able to tell where customers would come from. Okay. So, say, for example, if they come from working.
Yeah. So the question is, can front desk currently tell where a customer has landed on the page from? So which website they've come from?
Oh, which website? Not nationality. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the challenges with this. So yes. Sorry. The right answer is you can always, just as with Google Analytics, if someone arrives at your website, you can see what the referring URL, where they came from. The challenge is so many people, so let's say someone was an OTA and they think, oh, this hotel looks nice, I'm interested in more. So they're kind of, in a sense, they're coming from Expedia, but of course you wouldn't see that. What actually happens is they say, check out that hotel, they go to Google, they put in the name of the hotel, and then they come from Google. So you cannot see the entire history of where someone's come from, but you can see the last referring URL. Sadly, often it's Google, and you kind of lose out a little bit on the insight from that, but that's just one of those things. Maybe in 3-4 years we'll have the marketing tools available across the web to track that more, but at the same time that would mean tracking everywhere people are going on the web, and I think there's a lot of people who don't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've got a few more questions about the previous topics, but I think really quickly I just wanted to cover, we've gone through a lot today, so if we've been moving too quickly, I do apologise.
Sorry, it's still on the chat. Someone suggests you can always ask, how do you hear about it?
Yeah, someone has suggested that on the referrer URL, you can always ask in the chat, where did you hear about us, which is a very good point. But moving on to message, Charlie, I just wanted to cover this quickly before we open for the last questions. So I think a lot's developed in metasearch, even over the, I mean, it's constantly changing, but even over the last few months, in terms of its importance to independent hoteliers. And Charlie, I just wondered if quickly you wanted to run us through some of those latest developments and why independent hoteliers really should be thinking about this for 2018.
My goodness, you could go on for a long time about metasearch. I mean, some of the fascinating stuff that's happening right now is Priceline moving their spend. So, Priceline, the biggest ad spender on the internet, perhaps bar none or maybe bar one, they've been shifting quite a lot of spend away from, I think, Trivago and more towards Google. And there are some various reasons why they might be doing that. It might be about performance. Most likely it is, but it could also be because Trivago is an Expedia property and has recently created some more stringent demands upon OTAs and where they link, which I think is actually a good thing for hotels. So certainly we've seen that. We've seen Priceline also saying how they want to drive more direct bookers, meaning direct to Priceline. So they're going to be spending more money on advertising. There's an expectation they'll be increasing advertising also on non-hotel travel, so starting to compete with Airbnb. We expect a Priceline TV ad to come out soon, which will be all about vacation rentals. Sorry, that's a bit off metasearch. But the other thing I think we've seen just across the board for hotels is 2017 in metasearch is the year of Google. We predicted for a long time, at some point, Google, who's just getting so many eyeballs, make hotel ads work really well, and I think in 2017 it's done that. So we're finding most hotels spending more money and getting more return from the Google hotel ads. And looking at 2018, I think that's going to continue. The big change that Google are putting through, there's some changes in the way that the Google Hotel product works that have just been announced last week. But the other big change we're expecting to see is Google's version of TripAdvisor Instant Book. So Book on Google should allow hotels to increase the conversion rate of the traffic they get from Google, which should allow hotels to bid more and pay more for those conversions, which again could really shift the balance a bit more towards hotels away from OTAs. So I think that's going to be a really big one to watch next year. And there's some great, if meta searches is something you want to get more into, there's some really good organizations to go speak to, from Cody, Derbysoft, 80 Day, or Derbysoft, I should say. My pronunciation, sorry, is English, and 80 Days, and various others. But certainly, Google's one to watch for at the moment.
There's also a Triptease Hotelier's Guide to Meta Search that, if you wanted to read, you are more than welcome to. So I'm just going to skip through to the end now and just take any further questions, because I realise we covered a lot of ground there. So do refer back to the report. It's available on the blog if you want to know more about any of what we talked about, and do also get in touch with us if you wanted to know more about any of the links that we've talked about, or any of the organisations. So Christina, I was just wondering if there were any outstanding questions we didn't manage. So Charlie, you mentioned a change in Google that was announced last week. Could you provide a summary of that change?
Ooh, that's a tricky one, because interestingly, Google have been very tight-lipped about it. So the best thing, what I recommend is if you go to Google now and you search for FocusWire, that's PHOCUSWIRE, FocusWire, and if you look, that's a brand new travel tech portal from Focusrite. They've got an interview there with Oliver Heckman. Oliver Heckman is the head of travel and shopping at Google. He's the guy that usually does the announcements, and you can see in a little video with him, like literally all they've released at this stage that I've seen is an image of the new look Google Hotel products. They're rolling out to 5 countries to 1% of users in those countries over the next month. So no doubt it will be, tested, iterated, and developed. To know all the details of the change, they haven't really released it. It looks I'm guessing it's a bit more OTA-like, but we're yet to see.
Stay tuned. It will be covered when it comes out. Charlie, do you have any insight into the recent investigation into OTAs and accuracy, or presentation of the information they display? Do you think it is likely to change the way a customer thinks about booking? So I imagine this is to do with, in the UK, the Competition and Markets Authority recently opened an investigation into the major OTAs in terms of how they communicate their information to customers. So Charlie, do you think this is going to have an impact on consumer behaviour?
I have no inside information, first of all, to answer that question specifically. Do I think it's going to have an impact? I find it really interesting, because the CMA, this body in the UK, they've looked at and investigated online retail, online travel before, and it's quite a big move when they announce they're going to do a formal investigation. And so to be going back and looking over, as it were, old ground, they will have spent a long time deciding, is this really something that we think there's a real issue and we've really got to look at. So they clearly think there is likely to be something, a case that they need to rule on. But what that is, the timeline, the impact, now that Britain is no longer going to be part of Europe, what that impact might be is really hard to know. Interestingly, in the US as well, they look like maybe a bit of a follow-on. There was a senator, I think, last week, saying that they also think there should be an investigation. But I'm afraid, in terms of hypothesizing what the impact might be, all I know is I'd get it wrong. So I think we have to wait and see.
But thank you so much for all of your attention today. I know it's been a long webinar, but we covered a lot of ground there. And thank you for the questions as well. So our next webinar will be a joint one with T-News. That is on the 28th of November, and that is on a Hotelier's Guide to Live Chat, which the report itself is being released next Wednesday. So I hope you can join us with T-News, but otherwise thank you very much for your attention, and we will be sharing the video really shortly. So thank you.
Bye.